My name is Liam, Junior Baseball Fanatic 12, and join me as I travel across this vast card community interviewing some of the most influential and interesting names in the hobby on today's episode of In the Dugout with Liam. Hello everybody, welcome on into the Dugout. I'm your host, Liam, Junior Baseball Fanatic 12. Today we are joined by baseball author Brian Steverson. How are you doing?
Doing very fine, thank you, Liam. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, this is one of his books, The Amazing Baseball Heroes. I just love this book. It's inspirational Negro League stories. And thank you for taking time to talk with me today. I learned so much from this book, and I laughed and I smiled during this whole thing, and I loved learning the stories. So, when and how did you first fall in love with the game of baseball?
Oh, when I was very, very young. We lived in the city of Portsmouth, Virginia. It's on the coast, and had what I would say is probably a Class B team. It was in the old Piedmont League, the Norfolk Tars. Many of the great Yankees played for the Norfolk Tars. Phil Rizzuto, a number of them did. Newport News was a Dodger farm team, and many of the great Dodgers played in Newport News. We were the Merrimack Portsmouth Cubs. My grandfathers were baseball fans, and we would walk from two different areas of the town to the game to watch the Portsmouth team play. And so I went with each of my grandfathers at different times, and they instilled in me the love of baseball, and my father later on, obviously.
That is amazing. I love to hear stories like that. And what made you so passionate about the Negro Leagues?
Well, it's interesting. I love baseball, so I was following baseball. And then I went to a mall where there were some Negro Leaguers many, many years ago. And I met one of the great left-handed pitchers in the Negro League. His name is Verdell Mathis. He pitched for the Memphis Red Sox. And we were there, and I was having him sign the book. It's James Riley's great book, the Biographical Encyclopedia of the Negro Leagues. Very, very good book. And had him sign it, and we were chatting there, and there were other Negro Leaguers there. We were talking, and he just had me laughing and saying, I asked him, I said, did you face Buck Leonard, or did you face Josh Gibson, or did you face these players? And he was, yes. And he would sit there and he'd smile, and he said, yeah, and I set them all down. He had me laughing, and the more I talked to him, the more I got enthused with it. And so I started following it. And then subsequent to that, a number of years later, went to Alabama. There was an Alabama, I think it's called Negro League Association meeting. Anyway, Reverend Bill Greason was the president of it at the time. I met him and some other Negro Leaguers, and it just blossomed from there, Liam.
That is amazing. And some of these stories that you put in this book, you don't find in other books. What resources did you use?
Well, that's interesting. The reason I wrote the book that you referred to here, Amazing Baseball Heroes, is that my wife told me, you have got to write these stories down. We'd be at dinner, or we'd be with the grandkids or the kids or something, or friends, and I would tell a story. We'd on Hank Aaron or Willie Mays or on Dirk Gibson, any of those, Jackie, whatever. And they say, you have got to capture these. And I found, and it was true, that let's say the story on Hank Aaron and his nickname, you can't find in every book on Hank Aaron, or the story on Jackie, or the story on Cool Papa Bell, or that. So she said, you need to capture that and put it down. So I did, and it turned out to be this book. And so that's why I did it. Those stories, I didn't want to lose the thought of those. Some of the things these fellows said are just absolutely, as you said at the introduction, they make you laugh and cry, and just such wonderful, wonderful men, and such wonderful, wonderful stories. And what I will say this, since I'm talking to you now, I have met or interviewed, I have corresponded with some total, probably 250 of them, most of them dead now. Many of them I've met. But you know what, of that, and all of them experienced segregation and discrimination and Jim Crow ugliness. But you know, I bet you out of 250, I bet you there weren't 5, maybe less than that had anything ugly to say. There were any discrimination at all. They were so happy, so pleased to work with me, so pleased to talk about baseball, to talk about their experiences, and to laugh and that sort of thing. I remember the story, we met Hank Presswood many years ago in Cleveland. He's just a nondescript Negro Leaguer by most standards, but a great, great guy and a great player. Anyways, I asked him about facing Satchel Paige. He said, yeah. Satchel Paige said, I'm gonna whoop on you, Satchel Paige, when Hank came to bat. Hank said, Satchel told him, said, not today, Hank. First fastball went right past me, and Hank never saw it. He said, not today, Hank. Second fastball came in there. He never saw it. Not today, Hank. Third fastball came, and not today, Hank. So his wife started calling him, not today, Hank. He never saw. There are many stories like that where Negro leaguers face Satchel Paige. One of the favorite would say that I faced it, and it's strike one, strike two, bat never left my shoulder. I dropped the bat, went to the dugout, and the manager said, what are you doing? It's only 2 strikes on you. You got another one. He said, hey, I didn't see the first ball. I didn't see the second ball. And I sure gosh, I'm not going to see the third ball he throws me. So it dropped. So those kind of stories, if you don't they tell them to you, okay? Some of them are written. Most of them are not written down. And so I thought there was a need to write it down. My wife and I met Dirk Gibbons, Walter Dirk Gibbons, one of the stories in this book. Walter Gibbons is a Mandak League all-star up in Canada, as well as playing in the Negro Leagues from the Tampa area. He's dead now. And he was called Dirt. And why was he called Dirt? Well, when he was very young, he used to make mud pies. And he would go and take some of his mother's sugar from the bin and sprinkle it on the mud pie, and he'd eat the mud pie. Mud with sugar on it. That is still done today in Haiti and in a lot of poor countries. Right. So they started calling him Dirt. Dirt's not a very nice name, so they changed Dirt to Dirk. Well, it's hard to find that in many books, and so that's why we did that, to capture those kind of things.
That is so interesting. You don't hear that in many places. And that was sort of what I was going to get into, what made you decide to write these stories down. But also, how did you choose the players you wrote about?
Well, it depended on who they are. I thought each one would have a different story. Each one had a different focus. Obviously, you want to hear about Henry Aaron. And Henry Aaron is such a great story about where he came from. I interviewed over the phone Ed Scott. Ed Scott discovered Henry Aaron down in Mobile, Alabama. And as it would say in the book, he got on a train. His mother gave him, he was wearing hand-me-down clothes. He'd never been out of the area. Got on a train to Winston-Salem, North Carolina for spring training with Buster Haywood and the Indianapolis Clowns, okay? And he got off the train. I said, holy cow, he's no ball player. He was like 17 years old, 150 pounds, wearing his sister's hand-me-down clothes and a glove they said looked like it came from the Salvation Army. So you say, holy cow, you get to do that. Well, Ed Scott told me the story about how he found him. So you say, hey, we just have to capture those kind of things. Or the story about Cool Papa Bell. Cool Papa Bell, as Liam would know, you look at the autographs of today's baseball players and you cannot read them, right? I mean, it's just scribbled, okay? Cool Papa Bell, before he died, Cool Papa Bell, the fastest man ever, as you read the book Liam talking, fastest man ever in baseball. The Guinness Book of Records for the fastest man to go around the bases is 13.3 seconds. He did it in 13, could have done it in 12, and on a dry field. It was on a wet field, he did it better than 13.3. He did it on 13, and could do it on 12 on a dry field, and told me once, or I have a card once where he said he could do it 11 seconds. He is so fast, Satchel Paige would tell you, but he was so good. But anyway, Cool Papa Bell would sit there, and he would practice writing his name in a 3-ring spiral notebook all the time. Practice, James Cool Papa Bell, writing it, so that when you got a card from him or a ball, you knew you could read it and everything like that. What an amazing man. And then, not to keep going on him, but when he died, he was from Starkville, Mississippi, had been under segregation his whole life, had seen a cousin lynched, as a matter of fact. But when he died, there were 6 pallbearers. 6 pallbearers. 3 of them black and 3 of them white. And I'd ask anybody that'll look in here, if you had died, how many of you would have a mixed race pallbearers at your funeral? And this man died 15, 20 years ago, coming from a segregated background. It's just incredible these men were like that.
That's amazing. And my favorite stories from the book are about Josh Gibson and Buck Leonard. Mm-hmm. I loved the story where Josh Gibson hit a ball so high and far that nobody saw where the ball went. And that was in Pittsburgh. And the day later in Philadelphia, a ball came out of nowhere and dropped into the center fielder's glove.
Right.
And the umpire ruled Josh Gibson out the day before.
Right. Well, now that Negro Leaguers are considered major leaguers between 1919 and 1948, is Josh Gibson the greatest catcher of all times, or is our friend Johnny Bench the greatest? Okay, Josh Gibson hit a lot of home runs and did a lot of things, so Josh Gibson did great. And they found him because, again, I don't know that it's in this book, but it's in some of the stories that we read about. They were playing Homestead Grays. Were playing in Pittsburgh, which is where Homestead is. They were playing another team at Forbes Field, and it got dark at night. And lo and behold, the catcher busted his thumb on a pitch. And they asked Vic Harris, who was the left field, come on in and catch. He wasn't going to do it. No, I'm not going to risk getting my hand messed up because it's so dark at night. So they went in the stands and got Josh Gibson, who played ball for Gimbel's, the famous Gimbel's department store in downtown Pitt. And that's how Josh got started. He was a great, great, great ball player. And Buck was good because Buck, as you know, that Josh Gibson is a black Babe Ruth. Right. Buck Leonard is a black Lou Gehrig, and he hit a ball so hard one day in Pennsylvania that they hit the water tower in the town. And they said it rained for a week in that town after he hit that water tower.
That's my other favorite story. Yeah, you don't hear stories like that anymore.
He was a truant officer after he retired. Show you what kind of men these were. He would help young men, get them clothes, get them in school, make sure they were in school, and get them to church. Just like Jackie Robinson, the story of Jackie Robinson, which I encourage people to follow up on. What a true man of faith Jackie Robinson was. And so many people talk about his baseball experience, but just think of what the role model he is. And one final thing on Jackie. They did it. Darce Kearns Goodwin is the Pulitzer Prize winning historian. You see her on TV frequently. She's written many, many great books. She, Haverstam, the great author, Ken Burns, others. But they asked Darce, 3 greatest Americans of the 20th century. And she said right there on TV, on Book TV, 3 greatest Americans of the 20th century, Dr. Martin Luther King, Eleanor Roosevelt, the woman, and Jack Roosevelt Robinson. Not because of baseball, but because of all of the things he did to help people.
Incredible. Jackie Robinson is my favorite player of all time.
Yeah, and for those of faith who would like to remember, go to the book of Esther. And in the book of Esther, Esther saves the Jewish people. And her uncle Mordecai says to her at one point in time, when she puts her life at risk, he says to her, who knows that you weren't chosen for a time such as this? The same with Jackie Robinson. There are probably 15 to 20 Negro Leaguers who were better than Jackie Robinson. But who knows that he wasn't chosen for a time such as this? The others couldn't have done it.
And could you tell us about your favorite story?
In the book?
Or it could be in the book, or just that you have not shared before.
Well, I don't know. That's hard to remember all of them. But I think Reverend Greason's in the book. Reverend Greason, it's amazing to me. He landed on Iwo Jima, okay? And as Admiral Nimitz said, uncommon valor was a common virtue on Iwo Jima. He landed as a U.S. Marine. They were picked when he went into the service. There were 500 that applied or went to the selective service. Only 5 were chosen for the Marines. He was sent to a place called Montford Point because the black Marines couldn't train with the white. He trained with them, and then he landed on a supply group on Iwo Jima 5 days after the initial landing. 2 of his friends were killed on Iwo Jima. Those that remember history, that Iwo Jima, they let the Marines land because they were up on Mount Suribachi, dug into the hills and dug into the caves. And then once they were on the beach, then they blasted them. The beach was volcanic ash. You couldn't dig a foxhole. He was there, and he did that. And he carried with him a Bible. His mother had given him a Bible. And he made a prayer. They said, Lord, you get me off this island, I'll do anything you ask. So he went in the Negro Leagues, played in the Negro League, was a teammate of Willie Mays, first black pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals, teammate later on of Bob Gibson and Red Shandy, Stan Musial, a teammate in the Central America with Roberto Clemente. But at one point in time, somebody knocked on his door, and we know who that was, and he became a minister. And for 60 years, he's been a Baptist minister in Birmingham, Alabama, and he's 90. He'll be 100 years old this year, and he's still preaching at Bethel Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. So I love that story. He was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. And like so many of them, just like Bob Feller, you talked to Bob Feller, and Bob Feller will talk about his Navy experience in USS Alabama and less about baseball. You talk to Reverend Greason, he'll talk about faith in Jesus Christ and what it means, and less about baseball. It's interesting that people would put their faith so much more ahead of that. So.
Wow, that is really interesting. And now, are there any other stories that you would like to share that didn't make the book?
Oh, well, a lot. That's an interesting question because there's plenty of them. Did you know Willie Mays? When Willie Mays went up to the San Francisco Giants, you know who he roomed with that first year with the Giants? Part of the time on the road, Leo DeRocha's son, who was a teenager. Okay, black man with a white teenager, and they would read comic books together. That's why they were together. And then Leo DeRocha knew that if Willie was with his son, they would behave. Now Willie wanted to have soul food. His son wanted to have steaks and potatoes, so they had to swap out as to who would eat what and do what. So I think Willie Mays' story is good. A lot of wonderful men in here that have good stories.
Now, after reading your book, I now want to try and collect an autograph from each player in the book. It's going to be hard, but I would love to do that. Are there any collections you are currently working on, or any favorite pieces in your collection?
Yes, there is and you can purchase parts of it and then successfully build it. One of my favorites is Ron Lewis did a postcards. They are picture postcards. They're not the actual picture, they're drawings, and but they're very realistic. And did a Series 1 and Series 2. I think one of them has 30, the other one has 32 in it. And you can buy them online, and they're not cheap, and build that collection. It is very hard to build. The best one in the collection, to me, is Willie Mays. The picture of Willie Mays there, it's in color in a Birmingham Barons uniform, and you can get it signed in black or blue, and it's worth a couple of $100. But it's that whole collection. There are two players in the collection that are extremely difficult to get, Clyde McNeil and Lonnie Harris. But some of the cards in that, okay, like I said, it's 30 or 32. One of them has, I believe, Aaron Mays and Banks on it, so you know how hard that is to get all three of those autographed. But people have them, and there are other ones with people that people wouldn't understand, or maybe don't understand. So anyway, that's a good collection to have because it's so colorful, it's beautiful, it's easy to display. You can buy the individual cards probably for, well, look on the internet and get them certified, and we'll see, but they're good.
And I know you sent copies of this book to several people. Any favorite responses?
Yes, it's interesting. I did send it to a lot of people, and I have sent the other copies, the other two books, to other people. But the former commissioner of baseball, Fay Vincent, sent me a wonderful postcard. But the two that really knocked me down, I sent one to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and he was working with young people and trying to help people. And Kareem Abdul-Jabbar sent me a postcard, picture of him, autographed with a note on it, "Dear Brian, da-da-da-da-da." I was knocked down by that. I sent it to, in other books, to a number of ministers, okay, and a number of priests and bishops and that sort of thing. And maybe we got some responses back, which was okay. But I sent one to Reverend Harold Kushner. If you're not aware of him, he's a New York Times best-selling author. He's a rabbi, Temple Israel, I think, in Natick, Massachusetts. Very, very famous author. His famous book, and there are many of them, is When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Great rabbi. He sent me a 2-page letter back, and I was handwritten, and I was just astounded that I would get a letter from him, and yet some of the more famous religious people we all would know, I never got a response back from. But the two I got a response back from was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who wasn't a baseball player and was African American, and a rabbi who was not of the same faith we are. So it's just absolutely amazing. So
that is amazing. That's really cool.
Oh, it's just good to, and again, the stories become fun to talk to people about. And I just at the National, where your mother and you were and I was recently, I picked up a baseball for my daughter, and it was signed by Lou Holtz. If you have never listened to Lou Holtz talk, or if you haven't, listen to him at his commencement exercise at Notre Dame. He is fantastic. And he's saying if you want to have fun for a day, if you want to enjoy a day, eat a steak. If you want to enjoy for an hour, eat a steak. And then if you want to enjoy for a day, play golf. If you want to do something else, do this. But if you want to have joy the rest of your life, you accept Jesus Christ. Very, very religious person. Anyway, I got a baseball signed, Lou Holtz, Notre Dame, for my daughter. And the reason is, years ago, many years ago, probably 34, she was a waiter, and my son and daughter-in-law both worked at a restaurant called Galifte's in Pittsburgh. Notre Dame had played Pitt in Pittsburgh that day or that evening. He was at the table, and she came up to him, and they talked. And so she met him, and he was the one that told her. He said, I hope, Miss Stevenson, she said, I hope you don't want to become the coach at Notre Dame because I'll lose my job. So it's very special. So it's very special to us. So some of those things, don't have to be in baseball. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is basketball, and Lou Holtz obviously is football. So anyway, I would encourage, a lot of these men have been through a whole lot, and they've done a whole lot, and they're worthy role models. Jackie Robinson is a role model for all of us.
Yes, he is. Wow. Now, when I ordered this book, I ordered it from Amazon. There was only one copy left. After listening to you today, I'm sure people will want to buy this book. Is there anywhere that you know of that they can find a copy?
That's an interesting question. Amazon might be the way, or someplace like that. What it is I did not write it to make money. Okay, I wrote it for my family and for friends and folks like you to pass on the legacy of these gentlemen. So the publisher, Tennessee Valley Publishing, had done quite a bit of publishing, and they did it for me, and we have sold enough copies to basically break even. We wrote 2 other books. One of them is Baseball, A Special Gift from God, which relates verses in the Bible to baseball, and then another one, Baseball's Brotherhood Team, which relates to people working together in brotherhood in baseball. Those were published by Westbow Publishing, which is a division of a national biblical publisher. But in all cases, not a lot of them were published. In this case, I think 1,000 of these were published. And so they're out there, but you're going to have to search for it to get it. I did not do it to make a lot of money at it. And if I wanted to sell a lot of them, you'd have to go to a major publishing house and pay a lot of money for the publicity. What a publisher wants is a book on some popular subject by someone who, I'm not writing about Donald Trump. I'm not writing about Sohei Ohtani. I'm not writing because I was Vice President of the United States. So it takes a lot to get a book published.
So it is Amazing Baseball Heroes, Inspirational Negro League Stories. I absolutely love this book. I do know there is one left on Amazon, so if anybody wants it, make sure to go check that out. And I was wondering, would you autograph my book?
Well, sure. How do you spell your name now? Is it Liam?
Yes.
Okay. Let's do it right here.
Like I said, these stories were amazing to read, and just taught me so much about the Negro Leagues and some of these players. It's unfortunate that not all these players got to play in the majors with the greats that we know. So please check this book out. Thank you so much.
All right, certainly.
And thank you again. I always enjoy talking with you.
It's my pleasure. No, everybody should keep looking and investigating these stories and these players. You'll always find something of interest to them, and about what they did and how they did. Not to tie you up, but just to look at Satchel Paige. Who would believe Satchel Paige? And there are many, 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 many stories. And if I'm going too long, say so. Many, many stories that Satchel Paige warmed up over a cigarette. Not a home plate 17 inches wide. He warmed up over a cigarette. He warmed up over a chewing gum wrapper, which is less than 4 inches long. Okay. He warmed up over a cigarette butt. He warmed up over a dime. He warmed up over a matchbook. He warmed up over a matchbook. All those stories are told by different players. They said, yes, they said, no, go get this. Go get a cigarette butt. Go get a dime. Go get a matchbook and warm up over that. It's crazy. In one of the talks that I gave on him, in Rochester, New York, there's a hole in the outfield wall. Any player who had a ball through the hole got a free steak dinner or a free suit or something way out in the hall. So Whitey Herzog, who's in the Hall of Fame, and the other outfielder on the team, Miami Marlins, when Satchel was with the Marlins, and Satchel was over 50 years old at the time, they were playing, and he couldn't get the ball to go through there. And so Satchel asked him, says, Whitey says, did the ball go through there? And Whitey says, yeah, I just can't get it through that. Whitey Herzog was a great, great all-star gold glove player. So he said, I tell you what, I'll buy you a bottle of Old Granddad if you can put a ball through the hole. Old Granddad being a bottle of whiskey. So Satchel walked off 60 feet 6 inches, like it would be a pitcher's mound. First ball he threw ringed the hole. Second ball he threw went right through the hole. Whitey Herzog can tell you that. You can read his book, Whitey. He and his other, they could not do it. They tried and couldn't do it. Same way in the outfield, they said, well, Satchel, you're a pitcher. You don't have to throw the ball very far, very hard. And oh, we'll try. They took him out at Sportsman's Park in St. Louis, and they marked off 20 feet, and the first ball he threw went all the way to the backstop. Okay, if you do the math on the diagram of the stadium, etc., the second ball he threw went up into the second deck. Okay, if you look at what the Guinness Book of Records says for the longest throw ever made, that if you take the distance at Sportsman's Park from where he would have thrown it to the backstop, go up 20 or 30 feet, whatever the diagram would say, and then do the geometry of where the ball would go, he was within 20, 30 feet of throwing it as far as anybody ever thrown it in his life. And you say, oh, that's just a story. No. I talked to, I got to think of what his name, I think it's Billy Hunter. Was the athletic director at Towson State in Maryland, played on the same team with Satchel, with the Marlins in that time frame. And he said Satchel did it. I was there. I saw it. And not only that, he threw it flat-footed. He didn't run up and throw. He threw it flat-footed over 400 feet. You got to be kidding, huh? No, that's how good a man he was, huh? And did you know, and we'll close with this, more people saw Satchel Paige play. More people saw Satchel Paige play than any other baseball player in the history of the game. Okay? Now, that doesn't include TV. I mean, in person to see him. Because he played 12 months out of the year. He played almost every day of the year. And he played for that period of time. No one saw him play as much as the people of the world saw Satchel Paige when he was barnstorming in that. And if you ask Mickey Mantle, the only way Mantle ever got a hit on him was a bunt. Joe DiMaggio, when he was playing for the San Francisco Seals, got a hit off of him and said, I'm ready to go to the major leagues. I got a hit off Satchel Paige, which was a little dink. Ted Williams, all of them recommended. I saw Bob Feller. I asked Bob Feller how good Satchel Paige was, and he and Satchel barnstormed together. Bob Feller wrote for me on a card, one of the 5 best pitchers of all time. That's how good he was. All right?
That is these stories.
And you're wearing a Satchel Paige jersey.
I am.
And in 1965, he was 59 years old, and Charlie Finley brought him to Kansas City to pitch for the Kansas City Athletics, and in a game against the Boston Red Sox, a real major league game. And the Boston Red Sox pitcher that night was Bill Monboquette, a very, very good quality pitcher. And Satchel went, I think, at least 3 innings. There was only 1 hit off of him. Carl Yastrzemski, Hall of Famer, got a double. That was the only hit off him. Bill Monboquette said that Satchel Paige had more on his fastball that night than he did. And Satchel was 59 and Monboquette was an all-star. That's how good Satchel Paige was.
That is just amazing to hear this. I mean,
and those stories, that's why the stories have to continue, because again, that's why they're now major leaguers. And if you ask anybody in your audience, who are the last 400 hitters in baseball? Ted Williams in 1941, Bill in the American League, Bill Terry in, 36 or something with the Giants in the National League. And now Artie Wilson, who played on the 48 Barons with Willie Mays and Reverend Greason, hit over 400 in 1948. So now there are 3. You can get an Artie Wilson autograph on the internet, on eBay at any point in time. He hit over 400. He was called the Octopus because he could do so much. He played for the 51 New York Giants also. So it's kind of amazing.
This was amazing. Thank you so much, and thank you for spreading these stories out. I know there are a lot of people that would love to hear this. I absolutely loved to hear this. I love to read it. Once more, make sure to check the book out. And yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. Good luck to you.
I would like to give a big thank you to Brian for taking time to do this interview with me. It was amazing and I learned so much. And thank you everybody for joining me in the dugout. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you on the next one.